Welcome to Thriver Talks with Stephanie and Nalie. I'm Nalie.
And I'm Stephanie.
And today is episode 27 on Defying the Odds with Complementary and Alternative Medicine, featuring Ann Fonfa, founder of the Annie Appleseed Project.
And it is such an honor for both of us to have her on our podcast, talk about full circle. We've both been looking up to Ann tremendously for years on our own individual journeys with the stage 4 cancer diagnosis. Ann Fonfa was diagnosed over 25 years ago, had a stage 4 recurrence on her journey, and is still thriving today. And we're so honored to be able to share her with our community.
So without further ado, here is episode 27.
Hello, Ann. It is such an honor to have you on today's podcast. I mean, it's almost surreal, to be honest, because I remember finding you almost 9 years ago when I was first diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. So to have you on a podcast 9 years later is just almost surreal to me. So I'm very honored.
I feel really glad. I mean, I always say compliments go directly to my immune system, and it's my pleasure to be with you both. Really great.
Where are you speaking to us from?
I'm in Delray Beach, Florida, sitting in my house.
Nice.
I'm actually taking over my kitchen temporarily for an office. It just feels more bright and sunny than my regular office.
Amazing.
Beautiful. You have way more sunshine than we do here.
Yeah,
but
that's for sure.
In Montreal, New York. Basically, to viewers and listeners, because we're going to be, recorded and on YouTube. But for anyone listening, I think if you could just give us like a brief, you don't have to go into your whole story, but just give us like a brief, description of you and how Ann Fonfa came to be and such a huge inspiration, and maybe just your initial diagnosis.
Yeah, I was diagnosed in January of 1993 when I was not quite 45 years old. And no internet. I didn't know anything, and I didn't know anyone who was alive with cancer. The only person I knew was my grandfather, who had died when I was 12, and he died in 3 days after the diagnosis. So it was very scary. But this was on a Thursday when I was diagnosed. By Sunday, someone called me. I didn't know her. And she said to me, "You don't know me, but I'm a 10-year survivor." And I was, yeah, baby, I can do that.
Yeah.
And it changed my perspective. Instead of thinking, boy, Monday I'm going to die, I thought, I can do that. And so I worked hard to find ways to do it because I'm chemically sensitive. And I felt that I could not do chemotherapy. And from there, I realized that I was doing well. I was in a support group and I could share information. So that's what started me on the path toward the Annie Appleseed Project, because that was a way to share the information that I gathered in the 1990s before the internet.
Wow. That's
I know.
Incredible. Were you always chemically sensitive, Ann?
It started around 1989. I don't know what triggered it, but everything started bothering me, but I didn't know what it was. There was no real word for it. There was no official diagnosis, but I couldn't go into department stores comfortably near the perfume department. I hated window cleaning. I lived in Manhattan. Walking down the street, it seemed like everybody was always cleaning their windows when I was walking by.
Yeah.
I don't know how that happened. And I didn't like personal fragrance, hairspray. I wasn't comfortable with, I could smell people's deodorant. I could smell makeup. And
Wow.
I stopped hugging people. As you both know, I don't hug people.
Yes.
And pretty good right now.
You're
I
ahead
don't
of your
touch people.
time.
That's
Yeah.
been working out.
Exactly.
Yeah, hands-free. But
Exactly.
in 1989, but no diagnosis ever given, because no doctor ever felt like, oh yeah, this is a real thing. Now it's understood to be a real thing, but I never got an official diagnosis.
So because, like you said, your diagnosis was pre-internet, how are you finding these alternative healing ways to heal? Like were like encyclopedias or books, library?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Two advantages.
Encyclopedias.
I was in Manhattan. Yeah, encyclopedias. Right. I was in Manhattan. There was a library called the Center for Medical Consumers, and a mutual friend knew the woman who ran it. And she was so helpful to me. Anytime I had an idea, she would find a study on paper, and let me read it. And if I wanted, she'd make a copy. So the other thing was, things were happening in the alternative world. Everything, by the way, including what we now call integrative or complementary, was called alternative in the old days, including changing what you eat or exercising. The doctor originally said to me, the oncologist said, "Yoga, are you trying to kill yourself?" When really,
Oh my gosh.
really was worried. It was crazy. So being in Manhattan, I could find doctors or speakers. Well, I call them speakers because I formed a group that we could bring speakers in. And so I was learning while everyone else was, but I was healthier than everyone else because I hadn't gone through the treatment. And I recovered my health, but I ended up with lots and lots of tumors. So I had to keep on doing the research and finding new things to look at. And all the whole time I was getting acupuncture from my very close friend, which I think really made a difference because I had complete trust in her and I was able to really give myself into the treatment. I loved, by the way, the first needle was a moment of joy for me and I've loved it ever since.
I want to get into Ann Fonfa's mindset because we already introduced your story a bit. So say you know you're chemically sensitive, you get this breast cancer diagnosis, you go to the hospital and they suggest treatments. Did you ever do the treatments?
I had surgery starting with a lumpectomy.
Okay.
I think I was disillusioned from the beginning because the surgeon never mentioned that they removed lymph nodes. And back in 1993, they took axillary node dissection. So from the underarm, and they just grabbed a bunch of lymph nodes. I got 18.
Okay.
And when I was awake, the surgeon said, oh, they're all negative. And I said, well, I don't know what you mean. And when he explained it to me, I was really very, very unhappy because I wasn't thinking of chemo. And he had said the reason. I said, well, why'd you take them? And he says, well, we have to determine chemo because back then they had two different kinds of chemo, a milder version and then the anthracycline that they use now. But I'd already had an injury to my left arm, which developed lymphedema the minute he put the knife in, like instantly. Okay. So, and of course he didn't tell me that what I had. so I was very perturbed because he failed to tell me something important. They're supposed to reveal the harms. Otherwise you can't make an informed decision. Now people say to me, you signed that paper. Oh yeah, but I was wearing a backless gown and my glasses, my shoes were off. I was just wearing Pampers, it wasn't great. We all know that thing. I mean, that's how they do colonoscopies. My husband complained about that. I'm practically naked and they want me to sign this thing. I can't even see it, Anyway, it wasn't great. But I felt like if we'd had a discussion, I might have said, don't do the lymph nodes, which resulted in 27 years of lymphedema. Mm-hmm. That's kind of crappy. But it wasn't done. He said we got it all. And less than 2 years later, I developed more tumors. They don't get it all when they say that. I don't really know why they say that. I mean, they're sort of false hoping you, which I'm not a fan of. And it just went from there. But, the good news was, and I've said this before, I had 25 tumors on the left side. 9 were in the breast, 3 lumpectomies. And finally, I yielded to a mastectomy. I had 14 tumors over a period of years on the left side. But every single one, except the first one, grew slower than normal cells. In those days, what they measured was the doubling rate of the cells. Right. So normal cells double at 2.7 or 2.6, and original cancer was 3.5. So it was already slower. And the recurrences were all 1.5. So I felt success. I felt like I was getting somewhere despite having endless tumors. I had moments of doubt, but overall I thought, I'm okay. If it's growing so slowly, how can I be in real trouble? Despite that, in 1997, they told me I had stage 4. Because it was on the chest wall. Mm-hmm. And for many years, I thought I had stage 4.
But were they imposing chemotherapy on you?
Well, I didn't go back to the oncologist after my first round, in which he said, we'll do chemo next week. And I said, I'm chemically sensitive. And he kindly said, it doesn't matter. I'm like, wait, this is my whole life. You can't say that. So I didn't go back. Why should I?
That's what I want to understand. So the mindset behind you saying, I'm not going back, where did that come from? Like, what, were you scared? Were you confident immediately? I'm curious to know what went through your mind.
I think, it's kind of funny. I credit my ability to be a refusenik, which is what I call myself, because I was raised in a left-wing progressive family. So we always were a little bit different in our view of the world. And we were peace advocates, civil rights advocates, every kind of rights advocates. And I felt the ability to stand up for myself was easy. This guy was completely disregarding Ann Fonfa. And I thought to myself, I am not the cancer in room 7. I'm a person with issues that this guy, he can't hear it. So I wasn't going to do it. And I knew that. I mean, I didn't know what I was going to do, but in the support group, I remembered there was alternative medicine. I decided to do that. Worked out okay.
It's so inspiring because I feel like I have a little bit of that, or a lot of bit of that. What was the word you used? Refusenik. Refusenik. Because I've also always questioned every treatment or every approach. And I for lack of a better word, I constantly find myself challenging the system because if something doesn't feel right, I have to listen to that gut intuition. And one of the ways I came to find you, Nalie and I kind of have a cool story because I read Radical Remission. Maybe about 5 years ago, I was sent home to pass. They said there was nothing left they could do for me, also stage 4 breast cancer. And at that time, Dr. Kelly Turner's book had just come out. I read it, and the one thing that really stood out to me was Chinese medicine. I felt like I had kind of dibbled and dabbled with the other 8 steps, but Chinese medicine I hadn't tried. So I read the story, contacted my friend Luana, who has an organization, You Can Thrive, and she introduced me to Dr. George Wong, who I called, and within a couple of days, I was on a street corner in Queens, meeting him for the first time, and which has been, I believe, he's saved my life and been a huge turning point on my journey. But it wasn't until years later that Nalie was like, did you realize I didn't know that Dr. George Wong was your, in the book Radical Remission, when you tell your story, or when Kelly tells your story about you and Dr. Wong, I didn't realize that it was Dr. Wong. Nalie pointed that out recently.
Yeah, that's so great. I mean, I totally say that he healed me of breast cancer because there's no question. I had 25 tumors before I worked with him, and I had none after.
Wow.
And an MRI, I was good about this. I had an MRI first because I knew I wanted to prove if it worked or not, because I didn't know it was going to, and an MRI at the end. So I absolutely know that his herbs were what made the difference for me.
And how did you find Dr. Wong?
Mm-hmm.
Well, in those days, he worked at the Strang Cancer Prevention Center. He was the herbalist, and they actually had one on staff. So that was where I used to get mammograms. Of course, I only had 2, excuse me, before I was diagnosed. So I had one at 40, one at maybe 42, and then was diagnosed at 44. So I was in there getting the mammogram. So afterwards, they said, oh, we have this guy, but I didn't meet him at the time. I met him in 1998 at the San Antonio Breast Cancer Symposium, the first one that I went to. And he came up to me and he said, a friend of mine told me your crazy story. It was very unusual in those days. And he said, I can help you. But I wasn't ready in December. And it took me until April when I actually developed the 24th and 25th tumor that I said, that's it. I need a change. And I went to him. And he said, first thing off, he said, you have to stop everything you're doing and take my herbs. And I said, refuse, Nick, no can do. I found a path that kept me going and alive despite all the tumors. So I want to keep that protocol.
What was your protocol?
Well, I was taking dietary supplements. I was working out for an hour a day and, had a mindset that I think got me through it. And the mindset was, why not be a survivor? I mean, hey, I'm a survivor. Why would I put myself for a second in the, oh my God category? No, I just don't believe in that. It doesn't matter. I got the diagnosis of stage 4 from 2 different doctors in 1997. But I just said, oh, I'm sorry, I don't know who you're talking to. And I went on with my life because that's better. The interesting thing happened when I was 56, in this group that we were running, a famous doctor who was also 56 at the time. She got hit by a truck, died immediately, right? So she went out of the hospital where she was working, she's an oncologist researcher, clinical researcher, gets killed, dies instantly. And we're like, someone died not of breast cancer? But yeah, people die. So you can choose to be living and be happy, or you can choose to worry every minute, oh my God, I'm going to die. You know what? We're all going to die, period. It's how you live. And I'm positive of that. So that's how I live, because I just want to be happy.
I love that. And that's so inspiring to anyone listening or watching. So would you say, with that being said, that you believe that the power of the mind is like above everything else,
and it was a struggle for me to recognize that, because I was raised as an atheist, and I thought, oh, if I yield to spiritual, who knows what will happen next. But when I look back and I remember that woman called me on the Sunday night and told me to survive, that's what I heard. I heard you can survive. And so I realized after the fact, mind, body, definitely a major thing. But I've always been happy. I mean, there's something about my family, my sister and brother and I, we've joked about this. We have very happy genes. We wake up in a good mood no matter what. We can overcome anything. And I know I can, because I already have.
You
that's
definitely.
my motto.
Yes. I just want to say, like, to how that woman was to you, you were that for me, because like I said, when I was first diagnosed 9 years ago, I was desperately seeking answers on the internet, and I came across the Annie Appleseed Project website, and I was like, wow, and even though we hadn't spoken and it didn't meet till years later, just reading your story, I had that exact same mindset. If she can do it, it's possible. And that gave me like the battery in my back to realize that I can too live.
And I just have to say that this is a beautiful chain reaction that Ann, you even created, is because what that woman did for you and what Ann did for Stephanie did for me. And and absolutely. And when I had announced the reoccurrence stage 4 metastatic breast cancer to the lungs, Steph reached out to me on Instagram, and I'm sure a lot of listeners already know this story, but I found her message, and she proved to me that her cancer healed in the lungs and that I eventually would get there too. And that's why it's beautiful, because then even hopefully this episode and anyone listening, that chain reaction can then continue, because the proof is here, right here.
It's great. I want to make clear to the women and men who are listening, I'm not opposed to conventional treatment. It just wasn't right for me. I've established long ago that I will talk about holistic so-called alternative therapies, but also about things you can do in a complementary way. That means along with treatment. It's good to find an oncologist who understands that complementary means while you're doing treatment, because heading off all the adverse effects, we call them side effects. I don't call them that because they're not side, they're the effects. So they're harms, and everyone can suffer them. Anyone can, and you can suffer more than one. So it's why one of our primary things at Annie Appleseed Project was to develop a handout on reducing treatment toxicity with simple, natural things that have an evidence base. I'm sure people know, I hope they do, natural stuff doesn't get the millions of dollar clinical trials because they can't be patented. So the pharmaceutical industry has directly said, and we can't patent that, meaning we don't have a bit of interest in it. But, I'm not giving up because of that. There are plenty of small studies. And when you think about that, it's the preponderance of the evidence that matters. So we have on our website a downloadable handout. Now it's printed in a beautiful brochure, which I can't mail to anybody because no one's in their home or off. Well, home, but we don't do that. We do it to organizations. But, those things exist, and for a reason, because we can help people going through treatment get through it easier. And that makes a better recovery. This pain and suffering is not part of the recovery. It's not part of the good part of treatment, it's the bad part. But it's only recently been acknowledged by ASCO, the American Society for Clinical Oncology. It was only a few years ago they started having survivor symposium, and my organization sent 3 board members the first year, myself included, and we went the next year. We had an exhibit, and the third year we showed people, doctors, the oncologists, the handout. Some of them got into it, and wouldn't it be great if 100% of them got that message?
Oh, yes. I don't know if you know this, but both Nalie and I have spoken. We've taken turns in the last 2 years and spoke at the Miami Breast Cancer Conference. And we're really authentic in telling our story. And we were able to share Dr. George Wong and, the power of his herbs to a room of 1,000 oncologists. So that was just such a great turning point in my advocacy. And I know for Nalie as well, to be able to have that platform to say, hey, been 9 years, I'm still here. You might want to listen to what I've been doing. So that was such a great, way to especially put George on, give him the recognition that he so deserves.
Tell us a little bit more about the Annie Appleseed Project, because I'm sure listeners are like, okay, I want to go on the website. What services do you offer? And what will people learn if they visit your website and foundation?
So right now we are in the process of revamping it, but it's still up. It's just, you have to search for anything you want to find because the links aren't working and the PDFs are iffy. So we're redoing it, but it's a long process. Yes. But basically what the site has is the evidence, small studies, because that's what we have, on anything you can imagine, and also the basics. So for example, when we began to recognize that men were diagnosed with breast cancer, we had the largest assembly of evidence of studies about men with breast cancer. And men were coming to us and saying, oh my gosh, this is incredible. So now there are organizations, as you know, for men with breast cancer, and the Male Breast Cancer Coalition, among others. And we still have that information online. We also used to do a really specific special thing. Sorry.
No worries.
No worries.
We used to fund advocates to go to cancer meetings and write summaries. They go to alternative meetings, they go to integrative stuff, whatever, and write summaries so that others who couldn't get there, which is most people, could see what was written, could find out what the speaker said. And those summaries are on our site also as meeting summaries. And they're still there, and we're going to put them on the new site because I think that's really important and unique information. And then let's say you've heard about an alternative treatment and you want to know more. You can search on that and find information. The studies that are done, the history of it, people who've used it talk about it. Because one of the things I thought was really important was hearing from people who have experienced the treatment or have experienced the issue. Because, we're the people it's happening to. And when doctors talk about it, they're talking about it from a completely different viewpoint, I mean, like the doc says when you're a kid, that shot's not going to hurt, what they mean is that shot's not going to hurt me, it's going to hurt you.
So true.
We're the you. So we have to be aware of that. And so example, I went to a clinic in Mexico in 1995, and again in 97, I kept a diary. So it's Ann Fonfa's Gerson diary.
Right,
and it's on the site, and people can find that. So want to know more about the Gerson therapy from someone who took it? It's there. You want to hear what's going on now in the therapies. We have updated stuff. And the new website, one of the things I've been working on is finding like a study from, let's say, 2002 that we posted in 2002. And then people say, well, what happened since then? So we might post a study from 2016, whatever the latest one is, might be 2018. But basically the results are the same, because in the natural world, they don't do big, large scale studies. So you might find another 30-person study or a 50-person study that shows the same outcome. And it's my opinion that when you get the same outcome over and over again in small studies, that's worth a lot. And
So
probably,
true.
you may have heard me say at our conferences, which we hold once a year in West Palm. And thank you both for coming a couple of years ago. That was
Thank
great.
you for having us.
It's an incredible conference, by the way.
One of the things that happens is on our patient panel, people talk about their actual experiences. And in the world of evidence, there's a pyramid of what's important. And they consider in the mainstream that what you tell is an anecdote when you're a patient. The next level is case studies, which are better. Doctors tell them. But if we're telling our truths, and you heard the power of that, it's so real. It can't be argued against. You can't say that's not evidence, because, yes, you haven't proven that everyone will respond, but not everyone responds to conventional treatment.
So
either.
true.
All that we're showing is there's possibilities here. And if it worked for someone, it could work again. And I just kept saying over and over again in the early days when I didn't even understand evidence, I'd say, well, it worked for somebody. Why wouldn't it work for somebody else?
Exactly.
Worth a try, worth a try.
One of my favorite slogans, that my biggest takeaway after attending the CAM conference, was you always said that there are many paths to healing. You repeated that quite often, and that really stuck with me, because it's true. It's not that there's one way or another. There's many ways. So it's about finding your way. By the way, the CAM conference was incredible, and if people want to attend, are you having it?
Well, we hope to have it next February 25th to 27th in West Palm Beach. Yeah, 2021.
And will
Much
it be
better year than now.
Yeah. Will it be the 14th or 15th annual?
15th conference.
15th,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
So how did that was my question, like, how did you start these conferences? You just gathering all of these people from around the world, really? Because I remember we had speakers from Germany and honestly, that was probably the most informative conference that I've ever been to in the cancer world.
And so useful.
Yes,
big takeaways that we actually apply to our lives and our lifestyle today.
Yes.
Hey, you're boosting my immune system like crazy here. I appreciate that.
So how did they come to be?
A very odd story. I'm an advocate, and I know a lot of advocates. So I met this lovely man, Dennis Roth, and his adult son had a brain tumor, but had been treated by Dr. Keith Block in Illinois.
Yeah.
And Dennis said to me, oh, you should meet Dr. Block. I knew about him, but I hadn't met him. So we flew to Chicago, regrettably, in February. Not a fan.
Freezing.
I live in South Florida for a reason. But anyway, so we were there in the winter, and Dr. Block, very interesting guy, very research oriented, and we had a very good meeting. And then Dennis said, you should have a conference and you should feature Dr. Block. He said, I'm a philanthropist, fundraiser, I'll fund the conference. So I had no idea, but I'd been to a lot of conferences, so I knew what I wanted. And so I invited people around Dr. Block to be of interest. And I invited too many speakers, this I will say. It was insane, just one after another. It was too much. But unfortunately, so this was February. In May, Dennis died. He just woke up. He didn't wake up one morning. He had a heart attack.
Wow.
Whatever. So now we have the beginnings of the conference. I've got the hotel. I had to pay a deposit, and we don't have any funds. So that was when I began having insomnia, may I say. Really, seriously, could not sleep again. And but then a mutual friend knew Dennis and knew his family, and they had a family foundation. And she appealed to them and said, could you follow through on Dennis's promise to support this? And they did. So we were able to host the conference, and it went very nicely. We had about 110, 105, something like that, people. And, the same format pretty much. An organic lunch, organic snacks, patients' stories, a lot of speakers. And it was lovely. It really was. It worked really, really well. But it was exhausting because I did it 100% by myself. So,
wow.
So at the end of the conference, I announced to everybody, hey, it was great. It was lovely. I'll see you all. Forget it. We're never doing it again. And people said, no, we have to meet in person. This is our people. It's so important. So I said, oh, well, okay, well, maybe we'll do it again. So we did it again and just became a thing because people love it. So now I know we're in a series of webinars where people don't meet anymore. But our people say to me all the time, I don't have the support in my home community necessarily, and I need to meet with these people. And frankly, I say, on our patient panel, we choose people to speak every year. And sometimes they have to cancel out because that's our world. People get better, they get sicker. So we substitute, but I feel like we could pluck anyone from the audience and they'd have an interesting story to tell. Nice. So as you know, when you sit there at the lunch, everyone eats together, including the speakers, and you can have a conversation that's amazing with people and discover wonderful things and get a lot of energy for health and well-being. And as you point out, there's so many paths to wellness. And if you're not, the one you're on isn't working for you, you can switch up. That's a good thing to do. In fact, personally, I think because cancer is smart, and it's our own cells doing crazy things, it's a good idea to change up from time to time.
As you're speaking, I have to be honest, I'm getting so teary-eyed because it's just like how much work you've put into all of this work for us. Like you truly are like a pioneer. And like, it's true. I'm not even saying this on the podcast, but just the work that you've put in. And like you said, coordinating these, conferences by yourself and doing all this research, you really are just such a gift. And like, honestly, and it's a lot of work. And you've really, I'm sure you get it all the time, like have saved so many lives and inspired so many people to find their path to healing. So
let me just say immediately that every conference since then, I've had Julia Chiappetta as a volunteer helping with the hotel and the food. And nice. Julia is, fantastic at it. She's actually a meeting planner, but she's been volunteering with us all these years. And she and I together, I do the speakers and all the other stuff, and she does the food and the hotel rooms, which is very complicated because, like I said, people come, they get better, they get worse, and we have to change up everything a lot. But in any case, the thing is, I'm not, like I said, I'm not religious, I'm not spiritual. To me, the mind-body connection is being able to help other people. And I knew that from the beginning. Early on, I felt this joy and passion to be able to share what I was learning. And that's carried through, and I still feel that way. When I wake up in the morning, I want to rush right to the computer and start finding information and sharing it. We have a very active Facebook page, and I do post on Instagram, but not much. But on Facebook page for Annie Appleseed Project, I post studies every day. I post articles every day, and I want to do that. I have a specific special need to.
I'm so glad, Steph, you mentioned that because me and Steph are always connected. And I feel like that's something I wanted to say too, because Steph and I, as you know, we're still currently going through treatment. We're healing ourselves. We're prioritizing our health daily. And often we find ourselves on this teeter-totter where it's so hard to balance our healing, our health, our, keeping being at peace, but then also advocating and doing the work that we also love to do. And it's absolutely fulfilling to help so many thrivers listening. But sometimes I feel like calling you, Ann, and just being like, how do you do it? Like, how do you like, do you ever get sick of, for one, always talking about cancer? Do you ever feel overwhelmed? How do you balance health, healing, and then your entrepreneurship of leading this foundation and doing all the work that you do?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't have burnout, but there are days when the computer bothers me, and it might be part emotional and part, physical. So yeah, those days I take more of a break, and it's okay. It's okay to do that. And I was very impressed with your Thriver meeting in Boca, because you had so many people who were there. So obviously a very large audience of people, and you're doing really great work. And anything that any of us can do to help each other is a really important thing. It's a mission that matters. And but you can step back if you need to. I mean, my poor husband early on said to me, "Oh, if I never heard the word cancer again, it'd be great." I said, "Oh, sorry, it's not going to work out." It hasn't worked out. He has to listen to me rant pretty much every day. And the sad thing is, most of my rants are like what I learned in kindergarten. Like year one, I had all these ideas, and those are still pretty much my ideas. They're more developed, and maybe I rant more about them. I don't know, but I feel like ranting is very good for our soul. Get it out. Like, you can call me anytime and rant away. I'm good with that. I mean, today I've already spoken to 3 people with complicated issues.
Wow.
Well, because the radical remission thing is happening, and it's really reaching a lot of people. And then people find various ways. They've seen the truth about cancer. I have a session. So people are finding us, and they find us through Facebook. And then a lot of people call, and that's fine. I still have to send them stuff online, because I want to give them the handout. I want to give them how to do a coffee enema. I think it's really important. That's how you clean your liver. Coffee enema. It's great. I will say the funniest thing, I've been doing it since February of 1995, and this morning I couldn't get it to go right. I mean, how do you, 25 years later, I couldn't get it to go right. It's pretty weird. But
did you learn about the coffee enemas at the Gerson Clinic?
I knew about them right before I went. I went, I think, in July, and this was February, but somewhere I had read about it. Maybe I saw a video about the Gerson thing, and I decided to try it because, I was having all these tumors. And I also went to Canada with a group of women to try to find a treatment. Yeah, we went to Sherbrooke.
Yeah.
Sherbrooke. And we met Gaston Naissan and his wife, and they had a clinic, and we tried 714X, some of us. It was very interesting. There was dark field microscopy, which was the first time I heard about that. You look at your blood in a completely different way. I have a beef here. I shouldn't say beef because I'm a vegan, but I have an argument with the idea of mainstream thinking. So my husband and I were joking about this yesterday. It takes so very long for a new idea to reach mainstream medicine. Just shockingly long. So when I went to that conference, the San Antonio Breast Cancer Symposium of 1998, where I met Dr. Wong, I also heard about circulating tumor cells, which right now are a thing. So they're calling them liquid biopsies. There's just all these 20 years. I mean, now it's 22
It's
years.
So interesting you say that, because I just heard about that from an oncologist, that they wanted to give me a circulating tumor cell DNA test. So it's interesting that.
Yeah, I mean, but it's a blood test. So it's astounding that it took so long. It started in Germany. They presented papers. They had posters. They weren't even allowed to speak about it. It was such a thing. Same with dendritic cell therapy. I remember when that came through, it was considered the most alternative idea on earth. And now, 20-something years later, maybe a little longer than that, 24 years maybe, it's in play. So one idea that really troubles me is, it's okay to eat whatever you want. Sugar, yeah, no problem. Wait, let me give you a PET scan where I will give you a radioactive material with glucose, which is sugar, and see how that works, because the glucose is going to take the radioactive material to your cancer cells. But don't worry, it has nothing to do with eating sugar. And then they always say, no, in your cells it's different. Well, I got news for everybody. Stay away from sugar, added sugar. And I don't mean fruit. Fruit's a food. Mm-hmm. But when you're putting sugar, so these things trouble me, that it takes so long for these ideas.
And that seems like such a basic concept,
Common sense.
Yes, it's like I always thought the same thing. Like, you are getting a PET scan or in treatment, and they're wheeling around Coke and cookies, and it just doesn't make sense, right?
Terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible. Yeah. I mean, the first thing that I did I didn't have access to medicine, so I changed what I ate. The first thing that I did, and it was super important, and I believe with all my heart that it's the most important thing we can do, and we can all control that. It's totally within our own control. And that, that's great. You don't have to depend on the doctor or anybody else. You just start changing what you eat. I'm also a big proponent, as you know, of eating organic. And the reason is our fat cells, which we have all over our body, but especially in the breast, which I don't have, but it stores chemicals. It stores chemicals. So when for example, you remember that umbilical cord was tested. So a newborn baby has 200 chemicals in the umbilical cord from their mother who got all those chemicals. And then we say, oh, we don't have to worry about chemicals. You don't have to worry about detox. It's insane, really. And now we live in an interesting time. So because we don't have a lot of cars on the road, because factories aren't working so much, our air is so much cleaner. But you probably know that the EPA decided to lower the standards in the US. And what the heck, things were going on a roll for clean air, so we'll take that away. But that will mean maybe less lung disease and maybe even less lung cancer. Who knows? The irritants, I believe, are they constantly are inflaming and causing inflammation in the cells, and that can lead to cancer. Oh, anyway, just a lot of issues that are ridiculous. That start a long time ago, take forever to go through. I don't remember what yesterday's was because short-term memory.
So, Ann, if someone is in the position similar to you, or if a lot of people who listen to our podcast have a late stage diagnosis and they find themselves at a crossroad, or in fact, a lot of people are sent home to die, or they feel like they have no more options, what would you suggest is something that they should do? Is it worth taking the trip to Mexico? Is it worth coming to Sherbrooke in Canada? What would you advise them?
That's a complicated thing. I give information. I don't really give advice. But I would look at two things. Do I feel so exhausted and so lack of energy that I can't do next steps? I would invite a person or family member to make juices for me using organic fruits and vegetables, and follow the Gerson juicing protocol with potassium, with iodine for several weeks, see how I feel. Might get energy back. Lots of people have. I have been to the Gerson Clinic now 3 times. I have seen people come in weakened and unable to function, and you start doing the juice and the healthier foods and benefit a lot. So the key thing is how you live. So even if it's the last 2 months of your life, you can live better with doing that. But we all know that things happen when you start hyperalimentation, which is juicing. You get a lot of nutrients that probably you didn't get before. And that helps get you back into feeling well enough to think about what your next steps are. I always believe that each step helps you get healthier to go to the next step. And that's what you should look at. You don't have to do everything all at once, but start small. And I also favor coffee enemas because they detox the liver. Everything goes through the liver, all the drugs, all the pollution, everything. So if you detox your liver, you're helping yourself cleanse in a way that makes you healthier, makes you more able to function. And the liver is such an important, you can't manage without your liver. I've twice poisoned myself trying alternative treatments without reading the label, so to speak, not knowing all the details.
Oh, wow.
And it can, it's not a great idea, but those 2 things are enough, I think, to get people moving. Second thing, if you're stuck in bed, you can't get up, then you want to raise your arms in the air and wave them. It gets your immune system moving in a small way because you're lying down. The second thing would be to rotate your feet back and forth, because that also gets your immune. So any little bit gets you started. If you feel better after a while, then you get up and walk around the room. And if you feel better after that, you walk around your house, and then you can walk around the block, and those things are important. And again, this is what I started the kindergarten story. That's the first idea I had was, do what you can and take those small steps, because if you feel better, you can take the next steps. I believe in that.
Such great advice, because sometimes you have so much information, especially with cancer, and it could be so overwhelming. So I think that's like perfect advice. It's to start small and work your way up, and the juices. And something that really stuck out to me too is just diet is like one of the things that we do have control over, because a lot of the stuff we don't have control over. With that being said, you're vegan, and you have been vegan for a long time.
24, 25 years. But it's interesting because I was a vegetarian before. I didn't eat red meat, but there was, for many, many years, I started in 1974. There was no access to organic unless I grew it myself, which I did, but I traveled for business. So while I traveled, I would literally have to go into a restaurant and I would say, okay, you see that you have pork chops with asparagus. Could you just give me the asparagus? And maybe when really, the chicken you're serving spinach, could I have the spinach too? And put together a vegetable plate, because they had no idea how to do it in the 70s. So in the 80s, it was easier. You could say, I'll have the vegetable plate. It wasn't organic, but it was better than nothing. So, but a lot of times, I had to go with my work crew. I was a sales manager, and I would travel to a city and they'd want to go to Wendy's. So I would go to Wendy's and I'd have everything but the hamburger. And I'd have the bun, the special sauce, the lettuce, the tomato. It was ridiculous. So I wasn't eating great, but I was a vegetarian. And so, but the thing is, when I originally got the breast cancer, it was slower growing. Remember I said it was measured at 3.5, which was very slow, because in the support group, I found out there were women at 14, there were women at 40, and I had 3.5. So being vegetarian helped me, in my opinion. And also I did some workouts, but not like I did after the diagnosis. So I had the advantage that I'd already used diet in my life, change of diet. So changing to organic, vegan, that wasn't so difficult. Really wasn't. And also I call it vegan with mercy, because from time to time I have quark. Now, quark is a kind of European cheese like cottage cheese, but I hate cottage cheese. So there's a protocol called the Budwig protocol, Budwig diet,
the flaxseed
which is
oil.
Cottage cheese with flaxseed oil. So I did quark with flaxseed oil back in the 90s, and recently did it maybe 3 years ago last year for 3 years. Again, because as you probably know, and your audience I have follicular lymphoma now. I got diagnosed in January of last year, 2019. And I'm dealing with it naturally also. It's completely different than breast cancer, where so much is known, and yet we've made no big advances, in my opinion. But with follicular lymphoma, there's very, very few studies. There's very little to find out. And it's quite frustrating. But I'm still doing my same old, I'll try something, I'll try the next thing, I'll keep on going. Everything keeps me going to the next thing. And now, of course, I have the advantage of knowing doctors all over the world, as you point out.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I know protocols, and I'm able to try things and even get a discount.
Yes. Which is great.
What's your current protocol?
Well, so right now I'm doing poly MVA. I'm doing, I take aloe juice every day, aloe vera juice every day. Yeah. I take a ton of supplements, of course. I'm still working out every day, but now I'm lazy, so I only do 20 minutes a day. I used to do an hour. But,
Hey, it's still great.
But I'm 100% organic, and I have some other things. I was doing Halen 951 for 2 weeks. I might go back to that, I'm not sure. I'm still doing an herbal protocol from called Oncobel, which is a combination of 3 Amazon herbs. And I had some tumor shrinkage, but now the tumor's growing back. This has already happened 3 times. I've had tumor shrinkage 3 times, and it grew back. But I'm not worried about it, because I seem to be able to control it with new things, and that's okay. My same philosophy applies. I'm alive now, having a great time, and I'm going forward. Whatever happens will happen. I don't have control over that, except to the fact that I'm doing what I can, my ideas, and I'm always willing to try new things. People contact me with new ideas for me, which is really kind. My Facebook page, I often get a message, have you tried this? Have you thought of that? I'm open.
I saw something you posted on Instagram where you did have the shrinkage or report or something that you shared.
But now it's back, so it's okay though. Really, it is. I mean, I have this advantage. When I went to the GIPSA clinic last year from 3 weeks in November, and everyone was talking about what they were hoping for and all this kind of stuff. And I said, look, I have this advantage. I'm the only person here who's already healed of cancer. So do I have a belief that I can do that again? Absolutely. Absolutely. There's no question in my mind.
I really love that advice, because currently what I'm going through, getting monitored every 2 to 3 months, what's been happening is even my scan results keep showing, regression, progression, minimal growth, minimal regression. So, we're measuring these millimeters, and at a certain point, it was really driving me crazy. But then, here I am podcasting with you and stuff, and I'm living a phenomenal life. I feel good. So it doesn't change anything. And I love what you said. It's about how you live your life, how you feel currently. These little spurts of growth and this and that don't matter in the end, right?
I have the radical remission session coming up at 1:00. So
Oh, 8 minutes.
have to-
Okay.
I know we could talk to you for like
I know. We could talk for a
hours.
long
Got to
time,
take
but-
advantage of this. But I feel like, we'll definitely have some opportunities, especially once COVID dissipates, hopefully. And we have some plans to do some things. So it'd be such an honor to have you with us again.
Thank you.
And to go to a CAM conference and see.
Yeah, we'd love you to
Yes.
come in. And, I suggest for your listeners, if they want to check AnnieAppleseedProject.org, lots of information, or our Facebook page, which is also Annie Appleseed Project.
Great. And
Thank
we'll
you
link
very
up
much for
all the
hosting me. I appreciate
information.
it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Good.
much. Truly
Yes.
an honor.
Thank you, Ann.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
Ann. Take care.
That was such an honor to have Ann on our podcast today, even with her limited yet so valuable time, and to be able to share her plethora of knowledge with you. We hope that you enjoyed this episode as much as we did. If you know anybody who could benefit from Ann's knowledge, please share this episode with them. You can share it on YouTube or any major podcast platform. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our newsletter at www.thethriversguide.com.
Don't forget to give Ann a follow, as well as the Annie Appleseed Project. All of the information is linked below. And don't forget, where there's a thriver's will, there's a thriver's way. We'll see you guys next week.
Bye.